is Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Joe Lyons. He's a councilman in the city of Claremont, but he's also serving as the San Gabriel Mountains Monument Community Collaborative Chair. Let's go back a few years. I remember speaking with Congresswoman Judy Chu. Yes. She was very active in seeking the designation as National Monument for the San Gabriel Mountains. How did it ultimately happen, though? You could have congressional designation or a presidential proclamation. What happened?
Well, at the time, there was a initiative for making it into a recreational area, which is a congressionally approved status for federally held lands. That didn't make the cut when she was so actively engaged in that process. And so after a couple of years of thinking about, well, how could there be a preservation with greater input for resources to the Forest Service, she said, and asked the President Obama then to designate it by proclamation as a monument.
And it's interesting, right now, for whatever reason, I'm watching an extended documentary on the Roosevelts. Ken Burns did his documentary on the Roosevelts, and I finished the section on Teddy Roosevelt. And that president, a Republican president, by the way, was really instrumental in creating the National Monument movement.
Yes.
Our current Republican president seems to be less enamored.
Yes.
If that's a fair way to say it, with the National Monument movement.
Yes.
Because of that, how is the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument at risk, if you believe it as such?
Right. It's at risk simply because there were none excluded from the assessment that the President ordered the Department of Interior to make.
Yeah, so let's be clear. The President issued an executive order saying
correct.
All national monuments that were designated by presidential order, as opposed to congressionally, is that right?
That's correct.
Are under review. And I guess, well, I mean, we know this, a presidential order, executive order, can be reversed by a successive president.
That's correct.
So President Obama may have so designated, but the new president can change that.
That's correct.
So talk us through what the San Gabriel Mountains group is doing. Presumably you are doing something to try to save that designation.
Right. We are currently in the process of drafting a response that we think will highlight our reasons for, one, believing that the process that we engaged in, based upon the proclamation's desire to have public input, a goodly amount of public input, and we will be presenting that letter to the group as a whole in a week to then move it forward to the President based upon the group's consensus on its content.
You mentioned consensus, and what I find interesting about this particular national monument, I remember when President Obama made that designation, and some leaders on the more conservative side of the ledger in this area were pretty angry about it.
Yes.
They felt as if it was inappropriate, and I don't know if you want to call it a land grab, whatever it may be. What I know, though, is I've spoken with a few of those leaders, and they seem to have changed their mind at this stage. Obviously not everyone. I haven't spoken with everyone. But a few in particular have come on this show, in fact, and said the community collaborative has been quite collaborative.
Yes.
And so some of your friends, I presume, on the right side of the ledger are now sold on the National Monument.
Yes, they are, and I think it was the result of the fact that early on in the National Forest Foundation's facilitation of the process needs to be given all the credit for coming in, establishing ground rules, including the consensus rule, which I kidded the group upon its original formation that in my life as a politician, I only have to count to 3.
Right, here you have to count to how many?
Here I have to count to 50.
Right, because there are 50 of you as part of the collaborative?
50 as part of the collaborative, all that represent both the user groups and their representatives, the utilities, water interests, and public interest groups like the Chamber of Commerce.
So have you submitted the document to the President?
No, that will be, again, we are drafting it.
The
group that will be doing that is the group that I chair, which is the steering committee.
Do you feel as if all 50 of you will be able to sign off on that document?
I think that there'll be some that may remain neutral, but anyone who opposes the content is required to come up with an alternative wording that can be considered for consensus.
But would there be I guess you call it a dissent filed?
And that is always the option that can be done, especially with something as significant as this and the amount of work that the collaborative has put in as a really model process of public participation in plan development. So.
I want to talk about another group of 50
Yes.
in which you are participating,
Yes.
and that is the Measure H group. Let's remind our viewers, in March, I believe, the County of Los Angeles passed Measure H, needed 2/3 of the vote. It got 70%, pretty impressive. Provides for funding for homeless services. That is on the heels of the City of Los Angeles passing Measure HHH, which provides funding for construction for homeless facilities, so it's at some level looking to be symbiotic. Measure H committee, got a little bit of controversy.
Yes.
What's going on there?
And I think it's been reported in the paper that there were certainly some voices, mine included, that considered certain of the elements of the plan to be deficient in consideration of, for example, in my case, I represent the COG, San Gabriel Valley COG on that body, that cities weren't given a partnership role in its original conception. It comes on the heels of the 47 strategies that were approved for one-time funding last year. And the funding that was provided by Measure H is for continuation of that.
Okay.
That was a very county-centric body of strategies, despite the fact that it was county-wide. So as this money became available, and as you've just pointed out, with the support across the entire region at a significant level.
Even in Claremont.
And even in Claremont. And that's probably not so unusual for Claremont.
Or put another way, even in more conservative portions of the San Gabriel Valley.
That's right.
Maybe a more fair way to say it.
I think that's a fairer way to say it. And so it did pass, and now it's a matter of, I think, opening the opportunity for cities to engage.
But here's the question, though. There was tremendous excitement surrounding the passage of Measure H. You remember when the results first came in, it wasn't clear if it was going to pass, and then it went sailing over 70%. One could be flummoxed by this hiccup. Or is it even a hiccup in terms of the Measure H committee?
No, I think that it is not so much a hiccup, or it is a hiccup rather than it being an obstacle to the success of the program.
Not a full-on.
No, because I think that at the end of the day, the CEO gave it, Phil Ansell, did do his best to then corral the dissent into a workable consensus, with the promise being, again, like in the collaborative for the National Monument, the ability of the opinions of those whose concerns were not met in the consensus vote would be addressed in a separate letter to the supervisors.
So where do we go from here?
So from here, that document will be finalized
soon.
Soon. It will go to the Board of Supervisors, who will then review, in addition to public comment, will review the minority kind of concerns, as well as the recommendations of the group as a whole, based on consensus, and then we'll make a final decision as to the amounts being allotted to each of the various strategies that were approved.
And when can we expect the money to start flowing?
July 1st.
Okay, so this is right around the corner.
It is right around the corner. And I think that is part of the probably reason to think that it was so fast-tracked that there may have been some unintentional overlooking.
We'll talk more about it. His name is Joe Lyons, Councilman in the city of Claremont. I'm in the San Gabriel Valley today on Local Edition.